The great chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by living beings. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, far away from any planet or sun. The walls were made of crystal that had taken 200 years to grow. The ceilings stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed inside the room. Representatives from 900 different species sat in their seats, arranged in great circles that rose up like stairs in a stadium. Today, the chamber was completely silent. High Arbiter Vaughn stood at the center platform. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His species had helped create the Council 3,000 years ago, and his family had served as arbiters for most of that time. He had seen many difficult meetings in his long life. He had watched species argue and threaten, and sometimes even declare war against each other. But he had never felt fear like he felt today, because today, someone had asked about Article 7. The words hung in the air above him, projected in light so that everyone could read them. The text was simple. The meaning was clear. But the young ambassador who had asked the question did not seem to understand how serious this was. Article 7. Subsection 12 of the Allied Species Charter stated, "Under no circumstances shall any member species involve humanity in interstellar conflicts. Any species that violates this law will lose all protection from the Council. They will face punishment alone. The Council will not help them." Ambassador Kira of the Valoran Empire stood in her designated spot, her blue scales catching the light from 100 floating screens. She was young for an ambassador, only 40 cycles old. Her people lived for 300 cycles, so she was like a human in their early 20s. She had gotten her position not through experience, but through desperation. Most of the older Valoran diplomats were dead now. The war had killed them. "I do not understand this law," Kira said. Her voice was strong, but Vaughn could see her hands shaking. "My people are dying. The Drath Collective burns our worlds and takes our children. We have asked for help from 17 species, and all of them have refused. Now I learn that there is another option, another species that might help us. But this council forbids it? I demand to know why." Vaughn looked around the chamber. He saw hundreds of faces turn away. He saw ancient diplomats suddenly become very interested in their data tablets. No one wanted to answer. No one wanted to explain, so he looked to the oldest member of the council. Elder Counselor Tun sat in a floating chair because his body was too weak to stand. He was the last survivor of his generation. He was the only person still alive who had witnessed the Nexar incident. Tun's species looked like trees that had learned to walk. His bark-like skin had turned gray with age. His leaves had fallen away long ago. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind through dry branches. "Young ambassador," Tun said slowly, "you ask about humans because you have heard stories. You have heard that they are warriors. You have heard that they come from a death world, a planet so dangerous that simply surviving there requires great strength. You think that if you offer them enough credits, they will fight for you. You think they will be useful tools." Kira lifted her chin. "I think they will be allies. My people need allies." "No." Tun shook his ancient head. "You do not understand what humans are. None of you young ones do. You see their small bodies and their soft skin. You see that they have no claws, no venom, no natural weapons. You think they are weak. Are they not?" asked a diplomat from another section of the chamber. "I have seen humans. They are tiny. They cannot even survive in vacuum without special suits. Their bones break easily. They live for less than 100 cycles. How dangerous can they possibly be?" Tun was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with memory. "I was young when the Nexar hegemony ruled this part of the galaxy. The Nexar were conquerors. They had defeated more than 200 species. Their empire stretched across 40,000 star systems. They had weapons that could crack planets in half. They had soldiers that felt no fear and showed no mercy." The chamber was completely silent. Everyone knew about the Nexar. Or rather, everyone knew that the Nexar had existed once. Their empire had fallen 300 cycles ago. And no one spoke of them anymore. "The Nexar found Earth," Tun continued. "They found humans. And they made a mistake that cost them everything. They took human colonists as slaves. They thought humans would be easy to control. They were wrong. Kira frowned. What happened? The humans escaped. But they did not simply run away and hide. They freed other slaves. They stole Nexar ships. They started a rebellion that spread like fire across the Empire. And when the Nexar tried to crush them, the humans did something that no species had ever done before. Tun closed his eyes, and for a moment, he looked like he was seeing something terrible. They found the Nexar homeworld. They bypassed every defense. They landed on the Emperor's own palace. And they delivered a message. They said, "Let everyone go, or we will make sure that every child in the galaxy knows that the mighty Nexar lost to the weakest species they ever found." A murmur ran through the chamber. Kira's scales had turned pale. The Nexar Empire did not fall because of military defeat, Tun said. It fell because of shame. The Nexar were conquerors. Their entire culture was built on strength and victory. They could not survive the humiliation of losing to creatures they considered prey. Within 10 cycles, their empire collapsed. Their species scattered. They are nothing now. Vaughn stepped forward. This is why Article 7 exists. The warning is not meant to protect humans from other species. It is meant to protect other species from humans. But they are so small, Kira whispered. Yes, Tun agreed. They are small and weak and fragile. They know this. Every human is born knowing that they can die easily. They grow up on a planet that tries to kill them every day. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, even their own star's radiation. Everything on Earth is dangerous. He leaned forward in his chair. And because of this, humans have learned something that most species never learn. They have learned to care. They form bonds with each other that we cannot understand. They will die for strangers. They will fight for creatures they have never met. And once a human decides that something matters to them, they will never, ever stop trying to protect it. Kira stood frozen in her spot. Vaughn could see her thinking, calculating, weighing her options. Her people were dying. The Drath Collective was winning. She had no other choices left. What if I do not hire them as soldiers? She asked quietly. What if I simply show them what is happening to my people? What if I ask for their advice? The chamber erupted in noise. Dozens of diplomats shouted warnings. Several species began broadcasting emergency signals to their homeworlds. Vaughn raised all 4 of his arms, trying to restore order, but Elder Counselor Ton simply laughed. It was a dry, sad sound. Then you will have made the same mistake the Nexar made, he said. You will have given humans something to care about. And once that happens, nothing in this galaxy will be able to stop them. Kira bowed her head. She did not speak again during the meeting. She did not need to. Everyone in the chamber could see the decision forming behind her eyes. 3 days later, a Velaran shuttle entered Earth's atmosphere. It landed in a city called Busan, on a peninsula called Korea, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen when humans learned that somewhere out in the stars, children were suffering. The warning had been given. The law had been explained. But desperation makes fools of the wise, and Kira was very, very desperate. The humans were about to get involved. The rain had been falling on Busan for 3 days. Tay sat by his window and watched the water run down the glass like tears. He was 52 years old, and his body carried the marks of 30 years in the Korean Navy. There was a scar on his left shoulder from a training accident. His right knee ached when the weather changed. His hands, once steady enough to thread a needle in rough seas, now trembled slightly when he was tired. He had been retired for 4 years. He had a small apartment, a pension that paid his bills, and a cat named Bada who slept on his feet at night. It was a quiet life. Sometimes it felt too quiet, but Tay had seen enough excitement for 10 lifetimes, and he was happy to spend his remaining years watching the rain and drinking tea. Then the alien ship appeared in the sky, and everything changed. Tay did not panic when he saw it. The whole world knew about aliens now. First contact had happened 8 years ago, when a trading vessel from the Merchant Collective had landed in Geneva. Since then, aliens had become almost normal. You could see them walking through Myeongdong sometimes, buying souvenirs and taking pictures. They looked strange, but they were mostly friendly. This ship was different, though. It was not a trading vessel. It was sleek and dark, built for speed rather than cargo. When it descended through the storm clouds and landed in the park across from Tae's apartment building, he knew that someone important had come to Earth. He was not surprised when they knocked on his door. The alien who stood in his hallway was covered in blue scales that shimmered like the ocean at sunset. She was tall, nearly 2 meters, with large golden eyes and a long tail that curled behind her. She wore clothing that looked like it was made of liquid silver. "Captain Tae?" she asked. Her Korean was perfect, probably translated by some device he could not see. "I am retired," he said. "Just Tae now. My name is Kira. I am an ambassador from the Valoran Empire." She paused. "May I come inside? I have traveled very far to speak with you." Tae looked at her for a long moment. He saw something in her golden eyes that he recognized. He had seen it in the mirror many times during his service years. It was the look of someone who was carrying a weight too heavy for one person. He stepped aside and let her in. They sat at his small table while the rain continued to fall outside. Kira refused his offer of tea. She said her species could not process earth plants safely. Instead, she simply began to talk. She told him about the Valoran Empire. Her people had lived in peace for 2,000 cycles. They were artists and scientists, not warriors. They built beautiful cities that floated among the clouds of their homeworld. They created music that could make other species weep with joy. They had never wanted to fight anyone, but the Droth Collective did not care about art or science or peace. The Droth were conquerors. They wanted Valoran space because it contained rare minerals that powered their weapons. They had given the Valorans a simple choice: surrender everything or die. The Valorans had tried to fight. They had built ships and trained soldiers and formed alliances with other species. But they were losing. The Droth were too strong, too numerous, too experienced in war. Every month, more Valoran colonies fell. Every week, more refugees fled into space, with nothing but the clothes on their backs. "We have asked everyone for help," Kira said. Her voice was steady, but Tae could see her hands shaking. "The Galactic Council refuses to interfere. The other empires are afraid of the Droth. No one will stand with us." "So you came to Earth," Tae said. "Yes." Kira reached into her clothing and pulled out a small device. She placed it on the table, and suddenly the air above it filled with images. Tae saw burning cities. He saw ships exploding in the darkness of space. He saw soldiers in strange armor falling under enemy fire. And then he saw the refugee camps. The camps stretched across barren moons and empty asteroids. Millions of Valorans lived there in tents made of emergency materials. They had no homes, no food supplies, no medicine. Children with hollow eyes stared at the camera. Elderly Valorans sat in the dust, too weak to move, waiting to die. Tae felt something stir in his chest. It was a feeling he had tried to bury when he retired. It was the feeling that had driven him to serve for 30 years, the feeling that had earned him commendations and medals and scars. It was the need to help. "What do you want from me?" he asked quietly. "I want to hire you," Kira said. "I have credits. I can pay you more than you would earn in 100 human lifetimes. I want you to train our soldiers. I want you to teach them how humans fight. I am just one old man. You are Captain Tae of the Republic of Korea Navy. You led the Special Operations Unit that rescued hostages from pirates in the South China Sea. You developed training programs that are still used by your military today. You are not just one old man." Kira leaned forward. "You are exactly what my people need." Tae was quiet for a long time. He looked at the images, still floating above the table. He looked at the children in the camps. He looked at the fear in Kira's golden eyes. Then, he shook his head. "I am sorry," he said. I have seen enough war. I do not want to see more. Kira's face fell. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. But she composed herself quickly and stood up. I understand, she said. Thank you for listening. She turned to leave. She was almost at the door when Tay spoke again. Wait, Kira stopped. Those children in the camps, Tay said slowly. What will happen to them if your people lose this war? The Drath do not take prisoners, Kira said without turning around. They will kill everyone. The children will die last, so they can watch their parents die first. The Drath believe that fear is a weapon, and they use it well. Tay closed his eyes. He saw the faces of the children again. He heard their silence, more terrible than any scream. He felt the weight of his years pressing down on him, telling him to stay home, to stay safe, to let someone else solve this problem. But there was no one else. That was why Kira had come to Earth. That was why she had traveled across the galaxy to knock on the door of a retired captain in Busan. Because everyone else had said no. I will not train your soldiers for credits, Tay said. I do not want your money. Kira turned around, confusion on her face. But I will help you, Tay continued. Because those children did nothing wrong, and they do not deserve to die. And because someone has to do something. He stood up and walked to his old desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a device he had not used in 4 years. It was a military communication unit. Technically illegal for civilians to own, but no one had ever asked him to return it. I know some people, Tay said. Good people. People who feel the same way I do about children in danger. If you want human help, you will get it. But we do not fight for money. We fight because it is the right thing to do. He made his first call. A woman's face appeared on the screen. She had short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Hana, Tay said. How is the security business? Boring, she replied. Please tell me you have something interesting. I have something dangerous. There are children dying on the other side of the galaxy. An alien ambassador is sitting in my apartment. I am going to help her. And I need you with me. Hana did not hesitate. Send me the coordinates. I will be there in 6 hours. The second call was to a man named Wu. He was an engineer who had designed defense systems for the Korean military before retiring to teach at a university. He listened to Tay's explanation in silence, then simply said, I will bring my tools. The third call was to a young woman named Nari. She was a pilot who had broken 17 flight records and was currently on suspension for flying too dangerously during a training exercise. When Tay told her about the Valoran ships that needed pilots, she laughed with pure joy. Finally, she said, something worth flying. By the end of the day, 12 humans had agreed to help. They were soldiers and engineers, doctors and pilots. They were young and old, men and women. They had never met the Valorans before. They had no personal stake in this war. But they had seen the images of the refugee camps. They had heard about the children, and they had made their choice. Kira watched all of this with growing amazement. She had offered money, and Tay had refused. She had offered power and influence, and he had not cared. All she had done was show him suffering, and now 12 humans were packing their bags to fly across the galaxy and fight a war that was not theirs. I do not understand, she said to Tay as the rain finally stopped and the sun began to break through the clouds. Why are you doing this? You do not know us. You owe us nothing. Tay looked at her with eyes that had seen too much pain and had chosen to keep caring anyway. That is what being human means, he said. We cannot look at suffering and do nothing. It is not possible for us. Once we see a problem, we have to try to fix it. Once we know that someone needs help, we have to give it. He picked up his old military bag and slung it over his shoulder. Now, he said, take us to your people. We have work to do. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council received word that the Velorans had ignored the warning. Elder Counselor Tun heard the news and sighed deeply. It has begun, he whispered to no one. May the stars have mercy on the Drath. Because the humans certainly will not. The Valoran military base called Fort Vesa was the largest training facility in the Empire. It sat on a moon with low gravity and thin air, perfect for testing soldiers and equipment. Thousands of Valoran warriors trained there every cycle, learning to fight, to fly, and to die for their people. When the human shuttle landed at the main platform, General Doss was waiting with his best soldiers. He had heard that the ambassador had brought human advisors, and he was not happy about it. The Valorans were proud warriors. They did not need help from primitive creatures who had only discovered space travel a few hundred years ago. Doss was large, even for a Valoran. His scales were dark green, almost black, marked with scars from dozens of battles. He had fought the Drath for 15 years. He had lost friends, soldiers, and 3 of his own children to the enemy. He was tired of losing, but he was not desperate enough to take orders from humans. The shuttle door opened, and the humans walked out. Doss counted 12 of them. 12 small, soft, fragile creatures with no scales, no claws, no natural armor. They looked like prey animals. They looked like something the Drath would eat for breakfast. The leader was an older human male with gray hair and a calm face. He walked toward Doss with a confidence that seemed strange for someone so physically weak. "General Doss," the human said, bowing slightly. "My name is Tay. Thank you for allowing us to visit your facility." "I did not allow anything," Doss replied coldly. "The ambassador made this decision without consulting me. I do not believe humans can teach us anything useful." The other Valoran soldiers laughed. Some of them made comments in their own language, mocking the small creatures who had come to teach them war. Tay did not seem offended. He simply nodded. "I understand your concern," he said. "Perhaps a demonstration would help." "May I show you what humans can do?" Doss snorted. "You want to demonstrate? Very well. I will have one of my elite guards fight one of your warriors. We will see who falls first." "That sounds fair," Tay said. He turned to the woman standing beside him. "Hana, would you mind?" Hana stepped forward. She was smaller than Tay, with short hair and a body that looked thin and weak compared to the massive Valorans. She wore simple clothes with no armor. She carried no weapons. The Valoran soldiers laughed even louder. One of them, a young male with bright blue scales, stepped into the training circle. He was twice Hana's size. His muscles rippled under his scales. He carried a training staff made of heavy metal. "Are you sure about this?" the soldier asked, grinning. "I do not want to hurt you." Hana smiled. It was a small, polite smile that did not reach her eyes. "Do not worry," she said. "You will not." The fight began. The Valoran soldier swung his staff with tremendous force. It was a blow that could crack stone. It should have broken Hana in half, but she was not there anymore. She had moved at the last moment, sliding under the swing like water flowing around a rock. Her hand touched the soldier's wrist, just a gentle tap. The staff flew from his grip. Before he could react, Hana was behind him. She kicked the back of his knee, and he fell forward. Her elbow struck the base of his skull, and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The whole fight had taken 4 seconds. The laughter stopped. "She cheated," another soldier said. "She used some kind of trick." "Then send more soldiers," Tay said calmly. "Send as many as you want." Doss waved his hand, and 5 elite guards entered the circle. They surrounded Hana, their weapons ready. They moved in perfect formation, attacking from all sides at once. 3 minutes later, all 5 of them were on the ground. Hana stood in the center of the circle, breathing slightly harder, but otherwise unharmed. She had not used any weapon. She had not used any equipment. She had simply moved faster, thought faster, and fought smarter than the best soldiers the Valorans had. "This is impossible," Doss whispered. But the demonstration was not over. A young human woman named Nari walked to one of the training fighters. It was a Valoran ship, designed to be flown only by pilots with years of experience. The navigation system was complex. The controls required 4 hands to operate properly. "I want to fly this," Nari said. "Through the asteroid corridor." Doss shook his head. That corridor is impossible. The asteroids move too fast. Too randomly. We have lost 19 pilots trying to complete that course. No one has ever succeeded. Nari smiled. Then I will be the first. She climbed into the ship and studied the controls for about 2 minutes. Then she launched. Through the base's observation screens, everyone watched as the human pilot dove into the asteroid corridor. Rocks the size of buildings tumbled through space, crashing into each other, creating a maze of death that changed every second. Nari flew through it like she was dancing. Her ship twisted and spun, missing collisions by centimeters. She performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. She flew upside down, sideways, and once completely backward while still accelerating forward. When she emerged from the other side of the corridor, the Valoran pilots stood in shocked silence. Some of them had tears in their eyes. They had just watched someone do something they had believed could not be done. Finally, there was Wu. He was a quiet man who had not spoken since arriving at the base. He carried a small bag of tools that he had built himself on the journey. Your defense grid, he said to General Doss. The one protecting this base. How long did it take to build? 12 years, Doss replied, his voice now much softer than before. It is the most advanced system in our empire. It has never been breached. Wu nodded. May I see the control room? Doss led him inside. 4 minutes later, every alarm in the base started screaming. The defense grid shut down completely. The doors locked, the lights flickered, and a message appeared on every screen in the facility. Hello, from Wu. When Wu walked back outside, he was carrying a cup of tea that he had somehow made using the base's food systems. You should update your security protocols, he said mildly. There are some obvious weaknesses. General Doss stood in the middle of the training ground, surrounded by unconscious soldiers, staring at screens that showed his impossible defense grid had been cracked like an egg. The mighty Valoran military had just been humiliated by 12 humans, and they had made it look easy. How? Doss asked. His voice hollow. You are so small. You are so fragile. How can you do these things? Tay walked to stand beside him. The human's eyes were kind, not mocking. He understood how difficult this was for the general. We are small, Tay agreed. We are fragile. On our home planet, almost everything can kill us. We have no natural weapons. We have no armor. We are slow, weak, and easy to hurt. He looked up at the stars. But because we are weak, we learn to think. Because we are fragile, we learn to prepare. Because everything on our world wanted to kill us, we learn to never give up. We do not win fights by being stronger. We win by being more determined. Determined, Doss repeated. That is your secret? No. Hana said, joining them. Determination is just part of it. The real secret is simpler. We fight like we have everything to lose. We fight like our families are watching. We fight like giving up is not possible, because for us, it is not. Your soldiers fight until the situation seems hopeless, Nari added. Then they surrender with honor. That is logical, that is smart. But humans do not think like that, Wu said quietly. We fight until our hearts stop. Sometimes our bodies keep fighting even after that. We call it spite. When everything says we should fall, we stand. When everything says we should die, we live. Not because it makes sense, because we refuse to accept any other option. Doss was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something that might have been hope. Can you teach us? He asked. Can you teach my soldiers to fight like that? Tay shook his head. We cannot teach you to be human. But we can teach you human tactics. We can teach you to think differently. We can teach you that wars are not won by strength alone. He looked at the fallen soldiers, who were starting to wake up with groans of confusion. The Drath believe they have already won, Tay said. They think this war is about numbers, and weapons, and territory. They are wrong. This war is about will. And I promise you, General, No one in this galaxy has more will than humans. Doss straightened his shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt something other than despair. Then teach us, he said. Teach us everything. Tay smiled. We will. But first, help your soldiers up. The lesson starts in 1 hour, and everyone needs to be awake for it. He turned to his team. Hana, prepare a course on psychological warfare. Nari, find their best pilots and show them how to break the rules. Wu, I want a complete analysis of Drath technology by morning. The humans moved with purpose. They had come to help, and they would not stop until the job was done. General Doss watched them go. He had spent 15 years fighting a losing war. He had watched his people die, his empire crumble, his hope fade away. But now, for the first time, he believed they might actually win. Not because the humans were strong, but because they simply refused to accept any other outcome. And that, Doss was beginning to understand, was far more powerful than any weapon. The Drath Collective had conquered 47 species across 2,000 star systems. Their commanders had studied war for generations. They knew exactly how conflicts worked. First, you establish superior numbers. Then, you destroy the enemy fleet. Finally, you occupy their worlds and eliminate any resistance. It was simple. It was effective. It had worked for 300 years. When intelligence reports showed that only 12 human biosignatures had joined the Valoran forces, the Drath High Command dismissed it as irrelevant. 12 individuals could not change a war. The mathematics were clear. This was the last time the Drath ever underestimated humans. The first sign that something had changed came at the supply station called Nexar Point. It was a major refueling depot for the Drath invasion fleet. 300 ships passed through it every cycle. It was protected by defense platforms, patrol ships, and an army of soldiers. One morning, the station commander woke up to find all of his officers dead. Not killed by weapons. Killed by poison that had been placed in their food 3 days earlier. The poison was designed to act slowly, giving the victims time to spread it to others through contact. By the time anyone noticed, half the station's leadership was gone. No one saw the attacker. No one knew how the poison had been delivered. The only clue was a message written on the commander's mirror. We are watching. The Drath sent investigators. They found nothing. The station was locked down, and security was increased tenfold. 3 days later, the station's power core exploded. The entire depot was destroyed. 8,000 Drath soldiers died in an instant. And somewhere in the darkness of space, Hana smiled. She had spent 3 weeks studying the Drath. She had learned their language by listening to intercepted communications. She had memorized their military structure, their ranks, their traditions. She had discovered their superstitions. The Drath believed in ghosts. They believed that the spirits of those they conquered would haunt them in the afterlife. It was a fear they kept hidden, a weakness that no enemy had ever exploited. Until now, Hana began a campaign of terror that the Drath had no way to understand. Supply officers received messages from generals who had died years ago. Soldiers found the names of dead comrades written on their bunks. Ships reported seeing phantom vessels on their sensors, vessels that matched the profiles of ships the Drath had destroyed. Within a month, rumors spread through the Drath fleet. Soldiers whispered that the humans could become invisible, that they could walk through walls, that they brought the dead back to haunt the living. None of it was true. But fear does not need truth. Fear only needs doubt. While Hana worked on the mind, Wu worked on the machines. The Drath technology was advanced, but it was also standardized. Every ship used the same computer systems. Every weapon used the same targeting software. Every communication device operated on the same frequencies. Wu spent 2 weeks learning the Drath code language. Then he began writing viruses. The first virus was simple. It made Drath weapons overheat at random moments. Not enough to destroy them, but enough to make soldiers afraid to fire. The second virus affected navigation. Ships would drift slightly off course. Never enough to be obvious, but enough to miss their targets by kilometers. The third virus was Wu's masterpiece. It created ghost signals in Drath communications, echoes and whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Commanders heard voices giving false orders. Soldiers heard crying that sounded like their own children. The Drath tried to find the source of the problem. They replaced their systems. They changed their codes. Nothing worked. Wu was always one step ahead, adapting his viruses faster than they could be detected. And in the skies above the battlefields, Nari flew. She had trained a squadron of Velaran pilots in human aerial tactics. She had taught them that rules existed only for people who were afraid to break them. She had shown them that impossible was just a word used by those who had given up. The Drath fleet commanders watched in disbelief as Valoran fighters performed maneuvers that violated basic physics. Ships flew into asteroid fields and emerged unscratched. Bombers dove so close to Drath cruisers that they passed between the guns, hitting weak points that should have been impossible to reach. The Drath called them the Ghost Squadron. They never knew that the tactics came from a young Korean woman who had grown up dreaming of touching the sky. But the most important work was done by Tae. While his team fought the war from the shadows, Tae did something completely different. He talked to prisoners. The Valoran military captured Drath soldiers regularly. Usually, the prisoners were kept in holding cells and ignored until they could be exchanged. No one thought they had any value beyond trade. Tae saw something else. He learned the Drath language. He spent hours sitting with captured soldiers, asking them about their lives, their families, their hopes. At first, they refused to speak. They were warriors. They did not share feelings with enemies, but Tae was patient. He brought them food. He treated their wounds. He listened when they talked about missing their children. He showed them kindness that they had never received from their own commanders. And slowly, the truth emerged. The Drath Collective was not a unified empire. It was a fragile alliance of dozens of species who had been conquered and forced to fight for their masters. The soldiers were not loyal to the collective. They were afraid of it. They fought because the punishment for disobedience was death. Tae realized that the Drath had the same weakness as the Nexar. They were held together by fear. And fear could be broken. He began to make promises. To the captured soldiers, he offered freedom. He told them about planets in Valoran space where they could live in peace. He showed them images of former Drath conscripts who had already escaped, who were already building new lives. To the officers, he offered something even more valuable. He offered revenge. He told them how the Drath High Command lived in luxury, while soldiers died by the thousands. He showed them evidence of corruption, of commanders who sacrificed entire fleets to cover up their own mistakes. The prisoners began to talk. Not just to Tae, but to each other. And then they began to communicate with soldiers who were still serving in the Drath fleet. Within 3 months, the first Drath ship defected. Its crew flew directly to Valoran space and surrendered. Not as prisoners, but as refugees seeking asylum. Within 4 months, 17 more ships followed. Within 6 months, the Drath Collective was tearing itself apart from within. Conscript species rebelled against their masters. Officers turned on each other. Fleet commanders refused orders from the High Command. The Valoran military did not win the war by destroying the Drath. They won by giving the Drath a choice. Fight and die for masters who did not care about them, or escape and live in freedom. The choice was easy. On the day the Drath High Command finally sued for peace, General Doss stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the enemy fleet retreat. He had fought this war for 15 years. He had lost so many friends, so many soldiers, so many dreams, and now it was over. Tae stood beside him, looking older and more tired than he had when he arrived. The war had cost him too. But his eyes were calm. "We did not destroy them," Doss said quietly. "We did not defeat their armies or break their fleets." "How is this possible?" "Because war is not about destruction," Tae replied. "War is about making the other side stop fighting. There are many ways to do that. Killing is just one of them. Usually, it is the worst one." "The humans on the Galactic Council warned us about you," Doss said. "They said you were dangerous. They said involving you in our conflict would change everything. Tay smiled. They were right. But not in the way they thought. He looked out at the stars. We did not bring weapons to your war. We brought ideas. We brought hope. We showed the Drath soldiers that they had choices. That they did not have to die for masters who did not love them. That is what humans do. We find cracks in walls that seem solid. We find light in places that seem dark. And if the Drath had not surrendered? Doss asked. If they had refused to stop fighting? Tay's smile faded. Then we would have kept going, he said. We would have found other ways to end it. Humans do not give up. That is both our greatest strength and our greatest burden. Once we start something, we finish it, no matter how long it takes, no matter what it costs. He put a hand on the general's shoulder. Be grateful that the Drath chose peace, because if they had not, we would have given them something far worse than war. We would have given them our full attention. Doss nodded slowly. He understood now why the Galactic Council had issued their warning. Humans were not dangerous because they could fight. They were dangerous because they could not stop. And the galaxy was lucky that this time, stopping had been an option. The war was over. The Drath Collective collapsed within a year. Its conscript species forming their own nations. Its commanders fleeing into exile. The Valoran Empire survived. Scarred, but alive. And 12 humans from a small planet called Earth returned home. Their work complete. For now, 1 year after the war ended, Ambassador Kira stood before the Galactic Council for the second time. The Great Chamber looked exactly as it had before, with its crystal walls and impossible ceiling. Representatives from 900 species sat in their circles, watching her with expressions she could not read. She had been summoned to face judgment. She had violated Article 7. She had involved humans in her people's conflict. The punishment could be severe. Her empire could lose its seat on the council. Her people could be sanctioned, blockaded, even attacked. She stood straight and waited for the worst. High Arbiter Vaughn rose from his seat at the center platform. His forearms were folded across his chest, and his gray face showed no emotion. Ambassador Kira of the Valoran Empire, he said formally. You have been called before this council to answer for your violation of Article 7, subsection 12 of the Allied Species Charter. You involved humanity in an interstellar conflict. Do you deny this? I do not deny it, Kira replied. Her voice was steady. She had prepared for this moment for months. I went to Earth. I showed the humans what was happening to my people. I asked for their help. A murmur ran through the chamber. Vaughn raised one hand for silence. You understand that the warning existed for good reason. You understand that humanity is dangerous. I understand that humanity saved my people, Kira said. I understand that 12 humans accomplished what 900 species refused to do. They stopped the Drath. They ended the war. And they did it not through destruction, but through compassion. The murmur grew louder. Several diplomats began arguing with each other. Vaughn had to call for silence 3 times before order was restored. The council will now deliberate on the appropriate punishment, Vaughn began. Wait. The word came from the oldest part of the chamber, where the senior counselors sat in their floating chairs. Elder Counselor Ton raised one withered limb. Before we discuss punishment, Ton said slowly, I believe it is time for the full truth to be told. I am old. I will not live much longer. And there are things that this council needs to know. The chamber fell completely silent. Ton had never spoken like this before. He was the keeper of ancient secrets, the living memory of the council. When he spoke, everyone listened. 300 cycles ago, the Nexar hegemony made the same mistake that the Drath made, Ton began. They involved humans in their conflicts. But the story, you know, the story I have told before, is not complete. He closed his eyes, and his voice became distant, like he was speaking from a great distance in time. The Nexar did not simply kidnap human colonists. They attacked Earth itself. They burned cities. They killed millions. They believed that fear would keep the humans quiet. that overwhelming force would make them submit. Tun opened his eyes. They were wrong. He looked around the chamber, at all the faces watching him. The humans who survived that attack did not surrender. They did not negotiate. They gathered everything they had, every ship, every weapon, every person who could fight, and they came after the Nexar with a fury that this galaxy had never seen. "We know this story," one of the diplomats said. "The humans destroyed the Nexar through rebellion and psychological warfare." "No," Tun said. "That is the story we tell because the truth is too frightening." The chamber was so quiet that Kira could hear her own heartbeat. The humans did not just free slaves and start rebellions. They adapted to space warfare faster than any species in recorded history. Within 50 cycles, they had learned to build ships. Within 100 cycles, they had improved on Nexar designs. Within 150 cycles, they had developed weapons that the Nexar could not counter. Tun's voice dropped to a whisper. The humans did not defeat the Nexar through clever tricks or psychological games. They fought them in open battle and won. They pursued fleeing Nexar fleets across 100 star systems. They found the Nexar homeworld and broke through every defense. "And then?" Kira asked. "And then they stopped." The silence stretched for a long moment. "They stopped?" Vaughn asked, confusion in his voice. "At the moment of their greatest victory?" "Yes." Tun nodded slowly. "They had the Nexar at their mercy. They could have destroyed them completely. Instead, a human leader named Young stood before the Nexar Emperor and offered a choice. Stop your empire's cruelty forever. Let every slave go free and live, or refuse, and watch as we teach every child in the galaxy that you lost to the weakest species you ever found." "The shame option," Kira said. "You told us this before, but I did not tell you why they chose that option," Tun replied. "I did not tell you that the humans could have simply destroyed the Nexar and been done with it. They had the power. They had earned the right. But they chose mercy instead." He looked directly at Kira. "That is what makes humans truly dangerous, young ambassador. It is not their determination, or their adaptability, or their refusal to surrender. It is their capacity for both fury and forgiveness. They can fight with the rage of a species that has known suffering since birth. And they can stop. At any moment, if given a reason to believe in peace." The chamber was processing this information slowly. 900 species were rethinking everything they knew about humanity. "The warning was never about protecting other species from human violence," Tun continued. "It was about protecting other species from human attachment. Because once humans decide that something matters to them, they will move stars to protect it. They will sacrifice everything. They will never, ever stop." "And when they stopped," Vaughn said slowly, understanding dawning on his face, "the Nexar had to live with the knowledge that they only existed because humans allowed them to exist. That was worse than destruction." "Yes," Tun agreed. "That is why the Nexar Empire collapsed from shame. They could not bear being spared by creatures they considered prey." He turned to look at the entire council. "Now do you understand? The Valorans did not simply hire human mercenaries. They gave humans a reason to care. They showed them suffering children and asked for help, and the humans came, not for credits or power, but because they could not bear to see innocent beings in pain." "We should punish this," a diplomat argued. "If we allow this violation to go unanswered, other species will seek human involvement in their conflicts." "And would that be so terrible?" Tun asked. "The humans did not conquer the Valorans. They did not demand payment or tribute. They helped. And then they went home. They asked for nothing in return." "Because they are building something," another diplomat said fearfully. "They are creating allies, species who owe them favors." "No," Kira spoke up. "I offered them everything. Credits, territory, technology. They refused all of it. The human called Tay told me something I will never forget. He said that humans cannot look at suffering and do nothing. He said it is not possible for them." She looked around the chamber. "I have met many species, I have negotiated with empires and collectives and republics. No one has ever helped us simply because it was the right thing to do. Until the humans. The council deliberated for 3 more hours. Arguments were made. Counter-arguments were presented. In the end, they reached a decision that surprised everyone. Article 7 would be modified. The warning would remain, but a new clause would be added. Any species may seek human assistance in cases of humanitarian crisis. However, they must accept that human involvement comes with no guarantees and cannot be controlled. It was a compromise. It was an acknowledgement that the galaxy had changed. After the session ended, Kira received a message from Earth. It was from Tay. The text was simple. We heard about the council decision. If you ever need us again, you know where to find us. She smiled at the words. Such a small message, carrying such enormous meaning. On Earth, in the city of Busan, Tay sat by his window and watched the rain fall. His cat, Bada, slept on his feet. His tea had gone cold hours ago. Hana had returned to her security business, though she often disappeared for weeks at a time. Wu was teaching again, but his lectures now included sections on alien technology. Nari had been recruited by 3 different space agencies. She had turned them all down. She was waiting for something more interesting. The 12 humans who had traveled across the galaxy to save a species they had never met had returned to their ordinary lives. They did not call themselves heroes. They did not ask for recognition. They simply went back to being what they had always been. People who could not ignore suffering. But somewhere in the back of their minds, they were all waiting. Because they knew the truth that the Galactic Council was only beginning to understand. Humans were not dangerous because of what they could do. They were dangerous because of what they chose to do. They chose to help. They chose to care. They chose to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. And once they made that choice, nothing in the universe could make them stop. Tay picked up his cold tea and took a sip anyway. Outside, the rain was slowing. The clouds were breaking apart. A ray of sunlight touched the window. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between the stars, billions of beings now knew about humanity. They knew about the warning. They knew about the Nexar. They knew that a small, fragile species from a dangerous little planet had changed the course of galactic history twice, and they knew that if anyone ever gave humans a reason to care about them, everything would change again. The galaxy watched. The galaxy wondered. The galaxy worried. But on Earth, Tay simply smiled and scratched his cat behind the ears. He was home. His friends were safe. The children in the refugee camps were no longer dying. For now, that was enough. For now. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, the modified warning glowed on the central display. Do not involve humans in your conflicts. Not because they will harm you, but because they will never stop trying to help you. And once humanity cares about something, the whole galaxy must adjust. It was a warning. It was a promise. It was a truth that 900 species were only beginning to understand. Humanity had entered the stage, and the show was just beginning.